So listen, the more I think about it, the more I try to find myself trying to pinpoint when did we just become so lazy or lackadaisical when it came to our burial ceremonies and how we were buried and where we were buried and what with us and all this type of thing that surrounded our burial process during or after death, right? After we were laid to rest and everything in our burial process. When did the shift happen? Because if you go back and look at all the earlier civilizations, it was so much to it. And it seemed like it was a lot more pride in it. Today, it's like the funeral home director or whoever shows up to your house, they show you these packages. Most expensive thing probably is the casket or whatever it is nowadays. And that's it. You tell everybody, put the face on a flyer. You tell everybody they may show up with some t-shirts with person face on it. Other than that, then you go eat and that's the end of it. But where did that separation happen? I'm trying to figure that out. This video here is, we're going to see some strange ones now. This is going to be the 20 strangest graves in the world. Let's get to it.
The Tombachiwan is quite extraordinary. Over 8,000 terracotta soldiers have been found there, along with 520 horses, 130 chariots, most of which are still buried.
I think this one here by far is at the top when it comes to burials, graves, tombs, all of that. This one show me one crazier than this, and I'll quickly put this one down at my second. But for right now, this one here is at the top. He went all out. The Emperor of China went all out.
It comes to us all in the end, but have you ever really thought about what your final resting place on this earth might look like when you shuffle off of this mortal coil? A bit macabre maybe, but why not get creative?
You got little graves all around here.
Here are some examples to show you that you can really mix things up, even from beyond the grave. These are 20 strangest graves in the world. Number 20. The Hanging Coffins of Sagada. Sagada in the Philippines has the weirdest way of burying their dead. In a macabre twist, the elderly, and therefore close to death, traditionally prepare their own coffins. They carve them out of hollowed logs. It seems that the extreme strain of hollowing out the log, while all the while contemplating your mortality, could just be enough to finish you off. But that's how they do it there. When they're actually dead, their bodies are squished into the prepared coffin, even if it means breaking their bones. Ugh. Then they're brought into this cave for burial. Except they don't really bury them. They dangle them off the sides of the cave, or even from the cliff face, near to the coffins of their dead ancestors.
Listen, I can hear most of y'all right now. I ain't doing that. I ain't building no coffin. I ain't doing that. I can hear y'all right now, cause I'm sitting here saying it too.
This is an ancient practice that the Sagada people have been doing for over 2,000 years. The idea is that the higher the coffins are placed, the closer the spirits will be to reaching a higher place in the afterlife. They do eventually deteriorate and fall from the cliffs though, so it's best to never walk beneath them, out of respect of course, but also because, well, you don't want to be crushed. Now it's time for the fancy topic. Tombstones are not always the representation of the person who's died, but rather the idea of a loved one that they left behind. Perhaps this first image is, as we have been told, a tombstone that was commissioned by a widow to express her external love for her dearly departed husband. Perhaps she modeled for the statue herself. But what do you think? The second picture apparently belongs to an Italian operetta actress named something that I can't pronounce and her husband. The two are bound together for all of eternity. As always, you can comment down below using the hashtag #FancyTopic and let me know your opinion in relation to what I just showed you on the screen. Number 19.
So I'm guessing looking at that last tomb, it's not till death do you part. I mean, they was like, no. We're never parting. Not even in death, they're not parting. So I get it.
The Inez Clarke Monument. Now for an actual tomb. This is a sad and spooky story from the 19th century. When little Inez Clarke died in 1880, aged just 6 years old, her grieving parents commissioned a life-size statue of the child to serve as a grave marker instead of your standard headstone. Located in the historic Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, Inez Clarke's tomb is one of the most well-known and easiest to recognize. The sculpture itself took a year to be completed by a Sicilian sculptor, and then it was placed on the tomb. As time went on, a transparent box was positioned over the sculpture in order to protect it from the more harsh effects of the weather, but that is just the basics. A local legend goes that a night watchman was doing his rounds in the cemetery, and as he passed by the grave of Inez Clarke, he saw, to his horror and dismay, that the statue of the child was missing and that the box was empty. Apparently, he ran away and never came back. The next morning, the sculpture was in its place again, and there are so many stories of people witnessing a child in 19th century costume wandering the cemetery. It is very spooky indeed. Number 18.
See, I would want to do something like not like that, but something like similar to where you have like a sculpture or some kind of way where you know it's my distinct either coffin or something similar to a sculpture, and a person that I designate that nobody knows about that I could have like come around and just move my coffin to different places. I want it to be mobile that way. Like some family member walks out and sees my coffin and know it's mine, but then the next day it's not there, and then it's at another person's house, and then the next day, like I want to torment people after I'm gone.
Russia's City of the Dead. The City of the Dead is also known as the village of Dargovs in North Ossetia in Russia. It's located in a valley which contains a truly ancient cemetery where the residents of the area would bury their loved ones along with their belongings and their clothing. The medieval necropolis contains the mortal remains of more than 10,000 people. There's a local legend that says that anyone who enters the village of the dead will never leave alive.
Whoever enters the City of the Dead will not return.
But whether this is the case or not, it's actually unknown to me. I just work here. But you are welcome to go and test out the theory if you dare. The site today contains 99 extremely well-preserved medieval crypts, all of which have a single window so that it's possible to peep in and see how well the corpses have been weathered. If you happen to enjoy that sort of thing, which, if you do, is rather creepy of you. Number 17. The Tomb of Florence Irene Ford. This story is a sad one, and I can't even stand it. Florence Irene Ford was just 10 years old when she died, but during her tragically short life, she was completely terrified of storms, and so her mother had requested that her daughter's tomb was built in an unusual way. The coffin was to be fitted with a small window, and there were steps leading down into the ground beside the casket. Her mother wanted to be able to continue to sit with her daughter when there was a storm, just as she had done during her life in order to comfort her. She would sit beside the coffin during storms and read or sing until the bad weather had passed on. The spaces remain unchanged from when it was built in 1871 all the way up until the 1950s, when a concrete wall was added to prevent vandalism. Number 16. The Tomb of Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was the founder of the First Persian Empire all the way back in 559 BC. Some said that he had died in battle in 530 BC, but this was disputed by others. Anyways, we can be fairly certain that he did die sometime at some point and that this is his tomb. The tomb itself is a mausoleum built from stone in the far province of Iran, and it's a significant cultural heritage site preserved within an area of great archaeological importance. The structure is built out of two parts, a platform which has 6 stone steps, and a room with a roof that stands on top of this is part of the building. The tomb was renovated in 1972 and then again in 2002 and 2008, and every year it's the location for celebrations of the unofficial holiday known as Cyrus the Great Day.
See, now that gives me an idea too. Like, I would like something similar to that. But inside, you can go in there and like sit down and like all my videos would play. And you could just sit there, or people could go in and out if it's a lot of people, and you know what I mean, my videos is playing the entire time. Like, that would be dope to me.
What a fun one. Number 15, Tomb of the Eagles. Now we're headed off to the Scottish Islands, where in Orkney you can find evidence of a very ancient people. This is the Tomb of the Eagles, or the Isbister Chambered Cairn, which is a Neolithic chambered tomb that's perched on a cliff edge. The site was stumbled upon by a farmer back in 1958. He had a look around and found some skulls and bones, but eventually filled up the space with dirt. Then in 1976, an extensive excavation of the site took place, and masses of stuff would be removed from the tomb. They would unearth various bones and skulls, but no intact skeletons, and mixed in amongst the human remains were loads of talons and bones from eagles, somewhere in the region of 8 to 20 individual birds, hence the reference to the eagles themselves. It means the birds of prey rather than the cheesy classic rock band that your dad listens to. Archaeologists thought that perhaps the bird was a significant totem, but it seems that these bones may have actually been placed here at a later date than the people who were buried there, so that remains a little bit of a mystery. Number 14, the Tomb of Tutankhamun. One of the most famously cursed ancient treasures of all time was the Tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered on November the 4th of 1922 by a team of archaeologists who were led by Howard Carter. The long-lost tomb of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh had been left undisturbed for almost 3,000 years. When the tomb was opened and entered by Carter and his team, rumors then began to circulate that the curse of the pharaoh would befall all who had disturbed the boy king's resting place. Now, what truth could there have been in this curse? Well, as it happens, there were some sudden deaths reported amongst those who were involved in the opening of the tomb, and this is...
Nah, don't downplay it. There were some deaths that happened and took place after this tomb was opened and that curse was released. Now they can say coincidence, but for most of us who don't believe in coincidence, yeah, I believe it was the curse.
Has further fueled the legend of King Tut's curse. Lord Carnarvon, the guy who had financed Carter's expedition to seek out treasures and excavate in the Valley of the Kings, had met his untimely ending in March of 1923. His death was long considered to be mysterious, but the thing that's never reported is that he had suffered from poor health for many years previous and appears to have died from malaria or something similar after he arrived in Egypt. So, not so much evidence of a curse. Then there were other catastrophes that befell people who were involved. Howard Carter had given his friend Sir Bruce Ingham a paperweight which had contained a mummified hand, and then this unfortunate chap's house burned down. He tried to rebuild it, and it was immediately flooded. An American financier visited the tomb in 1923, only to fall sick immediately afterwards, and then he died a few months later. Another archaeologist who was so struck with fear of the mummy's curse that was offing people all around him, he took his own life, allegedly citing the curse as his reason. Over and over and over again, countless adjacent individuals and their families would suffer early or violent death.
So that the dead king could participate in mysterious rituals to become one with the sky goddess.
But Carter, the man who had first opened the tomb, was spared, living to the age of 64 and then dying of cancer. Now, there is a theory that Carter himself had actually began the rumor of the curse of the pharaoh, and it seems that in order to control the media frenzy around the discovery, he had concocted a story to keep the hordes at bay. But that is just what people covering up an evil supernatural curse would say now, isn't it? Number 13. The Tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The site of the tomb of the first emperor of China is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is so vast and complex that despite being discovered in the mid-1970s, the tomb itself still remains unexcavated. This is the location of the terracotta warriors, and they have done their job well in guarding their emperor even now by keeping the archaeologists busy while the tomb continues to remain undisturbed. The tomb itself is believed to be surrounded by mercury, making it extremely toxic and dangerous, and it's also now believed that there may be a lot of booby traps that also protect the emperor's body. It could get really Indiana Jones down there, and probably not in the fun way. And so the
jury is still out on whether I want booby traps. I don't know. So I want to say no. I don't want to go to that far, but it's a small piece of me that's like, you know what I mean? why not? I mean, if it's an option, why not? So I'm still working on that part.
Terracotta warriors have been the main focus of archaeological efforts and continue to be a much safer way to examine the deadly tomb. Thousands of warriors and horses, depicted in terracotta, stand guard over the ancient tomb. They were all sporting full armor and stand in a particularly menacing battle formation, facing east, as this would be the direction that the emperor's enemies would come from. Incredibly, each of the sculptures is an individual. They all have different facial features, hairstyles, and their ranks are made evident by their headgear. Each statue stands at around 6 feet tall, weighing up to 600 pounds, but the reason that archaeologists believe that these terracotta warriors were buried in the tomb is the ancient Chinese tradition of the afterlife. 3,000 years ago, the people of ancient China believed that when they died, they would exist in the afterlife, so the wealthy and the nobility of China wanted to take with them the things that they would need in the next world. That also included their servants. Yes, there was actually a tradition of burying the still living servants of royalty with them when they died. It's horrifying and kind of impractical. So when the emperor died, I imagine it was likely to be really inconvenient if all of his best soldiers had to go with him.
Like, imagine finding out, which God forbid anybody finds out anytime soon that they're about to go, but imagine finding out you're getting ready to go and you're like, okay, so now I'm gonna pretty much go shopping for what I want to take with me. All right, like I want to take that, I want to take that, I want to take you with me, I want to take this person, it was like that back then. Okay, I want to take this animal, I want to take these people, I want to take these jewels, I want to take this, and this emperor took everything. But imagine if that was how it works. Could you imagine going to tell your family, coming home and telling them the bad news, but then at the same time saying, you're going with me? I'm taking y'all, we taking the dog, we taking the fish. You love that vase so much, put it in the buggy. Like that would be that thought process doesn't exist today, but if it did, that would be crazy, right? Or wrong? Maybe it needs to come. I don't know.
The solution appears to have been to replace the living, breathing bodies with pottery depictions. Number 12. Mortafe Grave in Scotland. The next grave gives us a particularly gruesome glimpse into history and how burial rituals can be affected by all kinds of rather sinister happenings. This is a Mortafe grave. It's basically a cage that's positioned over the top of a grave site in order to try and prevent body snatchers from stealing the corpse of the recently departed individual beneath. It might have the appearance of some kind of zombie protection device, but it was simply an attempt to keep the dead person resting in their grave instead of being dug up and hauled away to be dissected for medical research. During the 18th and 19th century, it was almost impossible for medical doctors to get enough bodies to dissect and learn from in the way that humans' insides worked. It had been illegal for the longest of time, and then for a while, only the bodies of those who had been executed were allowed for use in this way. People were squeamish about the idea, but also, religion forbade what they saw as desecration of the body. This made the progress of medicine rather tricky. Some industrious individuals took to stealing the freshly buried and then selling them off to medical schools. It was a lucrative business, but naturally, people were rather keen to avoid being dug up, so they attempted to be left dead and intact by using mortsafes.
You know what? The more I look at this and think about it, if we face the zombie apocalypse, like a lot of people are predicting we may face, then these jokers may come in handy. Mental note. Somebody jot that down. These right here, keep that idea in the back of your brain.
Number 11. Allisons Dollhouse Grave. This next grave is in Connorsville, Indiana. This unusual grave marker is a green and white dollhouse that sits on the site of Vivian May Allison's final resting place. She was only 5 years old when she passed away in 1899.
Indiana, and died October 20th. 1899 at the age of 5.
Her father had been building her this dollhouse as a Christmas gift, but tragically, she died before she ever received it. Her heartbroken parents used the dollhouse as an unconventional tombstone and visited every week to maintain it for the next 70 years. When they then passed away, a local group of volunteers took over the job of caring for the grave and protecting it from vandalism. Number 10. The Tomb of Mary Ellis. When Mary Ellis passed away, her grave was carefully placed in a wooded area near the river in New Brunswick, New Jersey. But time marches on and things change. Her peaceful final resting place is now in the middle of a parking lot at a movie theater.
Let's just take a little walk around it.
She died in 1828 after a sad story of lost love and a lonely life, and was buried in the woods, and 140 years would pass by without any disruptions. Then the 1960s arrived, and the fashion for digging up green spaces and covering them with asphalt really got underway. Poor old Mary Ellis was buried right in the middle of the proposed parking lot for a discount store. Oh, the indignity of it all. And weirdly enough, the planners figured that they would just leave her tomb right there in the middle of the lot. As the years passed and the space has since been repeatedly altered and renovated, the ground around the tomb has been dropped, and now the grave and marker are 8 feet above the rest of the area. Number 9.
How many of y'all are that petty? Even in the afterlife, y'all are gonna be that petty. Me too. Me too. Don't move. This mine. This mine. Pay for this plot. Don't move it. Do not move. Yep. We all gonna be some petty jokers, bro. Gotta love it.
9. The Tomb of Jimi Hendrix. This next and rather large tomb belongs to Jimi Hendrix. The musician was from Seattle, Washington, and his final resting place is beside of his mother in the cemetery in Renton, about 20 minutes to the south of Seattle. He died in 1970 and was buried there. Since then, this huge memorial has been built to commemorate the life and work of the great guitarist. His marble structure surrounds the gravestone. It's 25 feet tall and has 3 walls, upon which are etched many of the musician's lyrics, as well as an image of the late guitarist himself. Like many famous graves, especially those who died young, Jimi Hendrix's tomb is a place that is frequently visited by music fans and curious tourists. And like many of those other rockers whose lives were cut short, his grave is often marked by graffiti, offerings, and is the backdrop for many a selfie. Seems to be a pretty disrespectful thing to do, but people also scrawl on the tomb with markers and leave lipstick kisses on the image of Hendrix, which is gross. The groundkeepers there are constantly having to clean stuff off of the memorial. Number 8. Amy Winehouse's grave. Amy Winehouse was a staggeringly talented singer who died at age 27 back in 2011. She had suffered from problems with alcohol, and the blood-sucking tabloids had hounded her and criticized her and delighted in her every stumble. She passed away tragically young, and her ashes were buried in North London in a grave with her beloved grandmother Cynthia. The headstone that marks her grave is black with pink writing, featuring a songbird, and it has a list of names of those who loved and mourned the loss of Amy. Like all the young stars who pass away suddenly, her life and death have come under much scrutiny. Films and documentaries continue to be made, and speculations are constantly being aired by unscrupulous media publications. Perhaps one day she'll finally be allowed to rest in peace. Number 7. The grave of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was a weird guy. The author's death itself in 1849 was surrounded in mystery. He had been found in a state of delirium at a tavern in Baltimore, Maryland a few days prior to his death and was then taken to the hospital. He gave no account of what had happened, and nobody visited him during those days before he died at the age of 40 years old. He was buried in the burying ground of Westminster Hall, which is now a part of the University of Maryland School of Law in Baltimore.
That sucks, bro. To go out alone. I never really thought about it, but I think that I would add that to like one of my greatest fears. Like just not nobody there with you or in your final moments. Nobody to share that. Nobody to, yeah. That would be rough. That would be rough. You think about that with like elderly people in like nursing homes and stuff like that. Like I just can't fathom that, but I get it though. I don't like it.
There you go.
He was interred near his grandfather. The marble headstone that was to mark his grave was actually destroyed before it reached its destination. A train had derailed and crashed through a monument yard where the tombstone was being held, and as a result, the grave of Poe was marked by a sandstone block that simply said number 80. In 1873, a writer known as Paul Hamilton Hayne visited the gravesite and wrote an article about how badly that it was kept. This would spark an interest from people in raising money for Poe's tombstone. The writer now lies beneath his massive monument that was the result of fundraising to the sum of $1,500, which in today's money would be a substantial $40,000. At the time of the new memorial, they also moved Poe's mortal remains to a more prominent location near the front of the church, but not without some difficulty. The first body they exhumed was the wrong one, and when they finally found him, it was noted that his skull was easily recognizable by its massive forehead. How weird. Number 6. Pierre Lache Cemetery. The most famous of the many Parisian cemeteries that I probably mispronounced, this one dates back to the Napoleonic era. It was established in 1804 by Napoleon I. These days, though, it is stuffed to the brim with bones of the departed Parisian people, including many famous former residents. The cemetery took a while to get established as the place to be seen dead, and it was believed by many to have been positioned too far from the city center. So they had a marketing campaign and had the mortal remains of the French philosopher Pierre Abelard moved there in 1817. Slowly, the cemetery would end up gaining popularity. Although the notion of a fashionable cemetery seems to be pretty weird, this one has definitely been attracting the deceased glitterati since the mid-19th century. In fact, there are hundreds of famous corpses in this place, and it's a regular place of pilgrimage for oddballs and cemetery-lurking weirdos who are looking to pay respects to the likes of Jim Morrison of The Doors, Oscar Wilde, and Edith Piaf. Number 5.
Well, if that's the case, then who would put me in a pet cemetery? Or, yeah, would y'all take me to the pet cemetery and visit me until I come back? Just a thought. If you got people willing to wake up one day and just be like, man, I'm just, you know what I'm gonna do today? I'm gonna run. I'm gonna drop off this dry cleaner. I'm gonna pick up a few groceries, and then I'm gonna make a quick stop by the cemetery. I've been meaning to go out there. Oh, so is somebody you going to see? No, I'm just going out there just to look and see some of the people out there, check out their graves and stuff like that. You down to go? No. Matter of fact, forget my number that you called me on.
5. White Shark Tombstone. You might really be into your favorite sports team or perhaps be completely dedicated to a hobby or passion. But would you have a tombstone that was also representative of this? Maybe, but what about your favorite movie? Would you then have to be obsessed, right? Well, indeed. And that must have been the case for Korean War veteran Lester C. Madden, who apparently loved the movie Jaws so very much that he insisted he be buried beneath a shark's headstone. It takes all sorts, I suppose. This headstone in the Allegheny Cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is certainly one of a kind, and you can't miss it amongst all of the regular blocks of boring old rock that everyone else went for. Number 4. The Strange Tomb of Ferdinand Arbelot. Ferdinand Arbelot is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, and his tomb is a rather surprising one, even amongst all the extravagant and ostentatious memorials in that famous burial ground. He was a musician, actor, and architect who was born in 1880 and then passed away in 1942. His unusual memorial was completed in 1946, and you can kind of see why it took so long to carve. It depicts a man lying on his back. So far, so regular. But it is unusual that he's holding a disembodied head in his hands and appears to be looking into its eyes. Creepy much? There's actually an epitaph that reads, "They were amazed at the beautiful journey which led them to the end of life." Cryptic, but we don't really know much else about it. Some stories would tell you that he wanted to gaze into the face of his wife for all of eternity, while others say that he actually murdered her before his own death. Nobody really knows, and frankly, could there be an even creepier way to gaze at your beloved than clutching their disembodied head? I'm not really sure, so let's just swiftly move on then. Number 3. The Nubian Pyramids. Ancient Sudan was a great civilization which thrived nearly 5,000 years ago. During that time, the Nubian kings of the Kingdom of Kush ruled over the region, and they, like the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, also enjoyed building themselves gigantic and elaborate tombs. These pyramids were built at a site in Nuri near the then capital of Napata, and back in the 1800s, archaeologists became very interested in the pyramids of Nubia. They had, of course, been pretty thoroughly plundered by grave robbers, and they took basically everything that wasn't nailed down. from every treasure and every object placed in the tombs to the actual dead bodies of the kings themselves. Nice! Then, in the 1830s, some lunatic explorer by the name of Giuseppe Ferlini thought that the best course of action in the excavation of these ancient and sacred sites was to smash the tops off of the pyramids. Yes, he actually did this to 40 of the Nubian Pyramids, which accounts for why they're not in the same sort of condition as their Egyptian counterparts. Number 2. The Tomb of William Jeffreys. Now, this is a story with a rather macabre origin. I mean, it is about a tomb, so that kind of figures. North Carolina State Senator William Jeffreys had such an intense fear of worms. To be specific, he had a fear of his body being consumed by worms. You know, as is the natural way of things. He had a dying wish to be buried inside of a big boulder instead of in the ground. This was way back in the 1800s. Jeffreys was elected to office in 1844 and seemed to be young and healthy. He was just 28 years old at the time, and so his return from a trip with what appeared to be a mild illness was not seen as especially serious, except that he then began to hallucinate. During that time, he started to talk obsessively about his death and the terror at the idea of being buried in the ground, and anyone who came to visit him was told to bury me in a rock.
That's Jeffreys, William Jeffreys.
He grew weaker and weaker, then he died in October of 1845. His family enlisted the help of a stonemason to honor his last wish to be buried inside of a rock. It would take that mason an entire year to chisel out the rock, and he also carved a traditional headstone with an inscription, as well as the weird final resting place of the man. There are some
So how are we supposed to know if the worms didn't get to him? Like, I'm kind of vested now, and I kind of want to know, but I can't make that call. But I wouldn't be mad if somebody did, you know what I mean? Preferably somebody connected or down the family line or something like that who can make that decision. I don't know who, but I would want to know. But at the same time, I don't want to disturb the dead, so caught in kind of a weird spot right here. But yeah, they shouldn't have told us then. That's what it was. They shouldn't have told us.
Extra rumors that surround his death. The weirdest and perhaps grossest is that while awaiting the rock chiseling efforts of the stonemason, his body was placed into a barrel full of brandy, and then that was lowered into the river to preserve him until his rock tomb was finished. The brandy? Well, it was then drunk afterwards. Yeesh. Number 1. Elvis Presley's grave. The family plot at Graceland, Elvis Presley's home in Memphis, Tennessee, is every bit as elaborate as you would imagine.
I already know y'all are going to be in the comment section. Elvis is not dead. You saw him in Vegas and all this type. I already know. I can see the comments happening. He was probably already typing. Y'all, there's something wrong with y'all. Seriously.
The tomb of the king and his parents and grandmother are positioned around a fountain in the grounds of the home that he lived in at the peak of his fame and until his untimely death there in 1977. The grave markers themselves are relatively simple marble blocks with black inscribed with gold lettering. It is not the original site of his tomb, however. He was first buried beside his mother Gladys in Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, but after an attempt was made to actually steal his coffin, which weighed 900 pounds and was solid steel lined and copper plated, no less, in order to hold it to ransom, the family then decided to bring him and his mama's bodies back to Graceland so that they could rest in peace. The meditation garden at Graceland is now the final resting place for the many departed members of the Elvis Presley family. Well, that's about all for today's rather depressing look at some of the more unusual tombs and burial sites of the world. Do you love to lurk about in cemeteries?